A broken cowboy hid from the world until an Apache woman arrived on a dying horse. Jared Lawson hadn't always been a man hiding in the shadows. There had been a time when he was known across the plains, feared by those who lived under the rule of law and those who lived beyond it. He was a cowboy who had ridden through the most dangerous lands, faced down bounty hunters, and come out victorious every time. But that was before. Now, the man who once rode with the sun in his eyes and the wind at his back was nothing more than a ghost. Jared had come to this old, forgotten town at the edge of the desert, far away from any trouble, far away from any memories. The buildings were old and worn, the streets empty except for the occasional wind that blew dust through the alleyways. His cabin, a small shack on the outskirts of town, was as lonely as he felt. It had been years since Jared had looked anyone in the eye, and even longer since he'd spoken to someone. He didn't want company. He didn't want to be reminded of the man he used to be. The people who knew him, those he once fought beside and those he had fought against, were all either dead or long gone. Jared had made sure of that. He sat in the dark cabin, a cup of coffee in hand, staring into the small fire he'd started. The flames flickered, casting shadows on the walls. He hadn't done much today, and that was the way he liked it. No one ever came out here. No one ever bothered him. But tonight was different. As Jared sat by the fire, he heard something. It was faint at first, the soft sound of hooves against the earth. His hand tightened around the cup, the old instincts kicking in. Who would be out here at this hour? He stood up and stepped outside, the cold desert air hitting his face. There, through the dim light of the stars, he saw the silhouette of a rider, a lone figure on horseback. The rider was close now, and Jared could see it was a woman. She was hunched over in the saddle, her posture slumped, as if she could barely stay upright. Her horse was moving slowly, its steps labored and heavy. Jared's eyes narrowed. The woman's horse was clearly exhausted. Its coat was dull, and its sides heaved with each strained breath. The horse stumbled, then came to a stop right in front of Jared's cabin. The rider slid off, her feet hitting the dirt with a soft thud. She didn't stand right away. Instead, she knelt beside the horse, her hand brushing the animal's mane. Jared stepped forward, unsure of what to do. He didn't trust strangers, especially ones who appeared in the middle of nowhere. But there was something about the way she looked at him. Her face hidden beneath a scarf, but her eyes full of pain and desperation. "I need help," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. Jared hesitated, then spoke. "What are you doing out here?" The woman's gaze shifted to the dead horse beside her, her face twisted in both sorrow and determination. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, her words slow, each one weighed with effort. "I'm looking for someone. You've come to the wrong place. No one's here but me." Instead, she looked down at the horse, her fingers gently running over its body. Jared's gaze followed hers. The horse was in bad shape, too thin, its coat matted with sweat and dirt. It was dying. "Let me help you," Jared said, surprising himself. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his for the first time. There was something in those eyes, something familiar, like he had seen that same kind of weariness before. "You'll regret it," she said softly. But she didn't argue. She was too tired, too drained, to resist. Jared didn't know what it was about this woman that made him take the first step toward her, but he did. He offered his hand, and she took it, rising unsteadily to her feet. With a grunt, Jared helped her to the cabin. Once inside, he let her sit by the fire. She didn't speak much, her eyes closed as she tried to rest. Jared moved to the door, looking out over the desert. Something didn't feel right. It was more than just the way she'd looked at him. It was the way she had come here, through the desert, with nothing but a dying horse. She wasn't just some lost traveler. "I'm Naomi," she said quietly, as if she had read his thoughts. "I'm not looking for you, not exactly, but you're the only one who can help." Jared didn't respond right away. Instead, he just studied her, noticing the subtle way she carried herself despite her exhaustion, the way her eyes never stopped scanning the room. This was no ordinary woman. "What do you mean, I can help?" Jared asked. "Who are you really?" Naomi shifted slightly, wincing as she did. "I'm Apache," she said, her voice carrying an ancient weight. "And you're not just some cowboy hiding from the world. You're the key to stopping something that could destroy us all." Jared frowned. He didn't understand. He wasn't anyone's savior. He was just a man trying to forget, trying to hide from a past that wouldn't let go. "I don't want any part of your war," he said, turning away from her. but Naomi's voice stopped him. It's not just a war. It's bigger than that. You don't have to believe me, but you will. Soon enough, you'll see why you can't hide anymore. Jared stood there, his back to her, torn between the urge to throw her out and the strange pull inside him to hear more. The wind howled outside, but inside it felt as though the storm had only just begun. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting long shadows against the walls of Jared's cabin. Naomi sat by the fire, her face pale and her body stiff with exhaustion. Jared had given her water and food, but her thoughts seemed far away. He could tell that she wasn't just tired from the journey. There was something weighing on her, a secret she was reluctant to share. Jared leaned against the doorframe, watching her. The silence between them stretched out, thick and heavy. He had never been one for conversation, but the words she had spoken earlier echoed in his mind. You're the key to stopping something that could destroy us all. Jared didn't know what she meant. He hadn't been part of any war, hadn't fought in any battles for years. He had left all that behind, buried it deep inside himself. But Naomi's words seemed to pull at something in him, something long forgotten. After a while, Naomi spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to involve you. I never wanted to bring you back into this world. Her eyes met his, and he saw something in them, a mixture of guilt and determination. But there's no one else who can help. Jared frowned and crossed his arms over his chest. Help with what? Naomi took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she adjusted her cloak. It's hard to explain. But there's a group. They're trying to use technology from the stars. Alien technology, ancient and powerful. It's already started to change the land, the people, everything. Jared's mind raced. He had heard rumors, whispers about strange things happening on the edges of the frontier. Some spoke of new machines, things that moved faster than horses, things that could turn the tide of any fight, but alien technology? That was something else entirely. I don't know what you're talking about, Jared said, his voice low. I'm just a cowboy. I don't want any part of this, whatever it is. Naomi's eyes softened and she nodded slowly. I understand, but you were once part of something bigger. You were a soldier, one of the best. You fought in battles that no one else would dare face, and you've got something that no one else does, the experience. The strength to face what's coming. Jared looked away, his jaw tightening. He didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to be reminded of his past, of the man he had been before he had come to this lonely cabin. He had done things, terrible things, things that still haunted him. The blood of his enemies and the blood of those who had trusted him stained his memories.
He had turned his back on all of it. He had turned his back on himself.
I'm not that man anymore, he muttered. Naomi didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood up and walked toward the window. She stared out into the dark night, her face illuminated by the faint light of the stars. You don't have to be, she said softly, but the world still needs men like you. No, I've got nothing to offer anymore. Maybe not, Naomi replied, her voice steady now, but you're still the one who can stop them. Jared took a step forward, frustration building in his chest. Stop who? Stop what? Naomi turned back to him, her expression serious. The people I'm running from. They're after something that could change everything. They're after the power to control this land, to bend it to their will. They've already begun using alien technology, but they don't know how to control it. If they succeed, she paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. If they succeed, Naomi continued, her voice low and urgent, they'll turn the entire world into a wasteland. The machines they've found can create storms, earthquakes. They can warp the land itself, and they're just getting started. They won't stop until they've destroyed everything, including you.
Jared's eyes narrowed.
And why me? Why did you come to me? Naomi hesitated. Because you're the key. The machine, the technology, it recognizes you. You've seen it before. Jared stared at her, his mind racing.
He didn't remember anything about any machine. He didn't understand what she was talking about.
I don't know what you mean, he said, his voice rising. Naomi met his gaze. When you were in the war, you were part of a project. A project that involved the same technology the mercenaries are after. They don't know it, but you do. You've been connected to it. That's why they're after you. They think you can unlock the power they need. Jared's heart pounded in his chest. He remembered now. Faint memories of strange machines, of scientists and soldiers working together in secret, but he had never understood what it all meant. He had never known that it would come back to haunt him. "You're lying," Jared said, shaking his head. "There's no way." Naomi stepped forward, her hands raised. "I know it's hard to believe, but I swear to you, Jared, you're the only one who can stop them, the only one who knows how to control it." Jared took a deep breath, his mind spinning. He didn't want to believe her. He didn't want to be pulled back into a world he had tried to forget, but the look in Naomi's eyes, the urgency in her voice, it made him question everything. For the first time in years, Jared felt something stir within him. A spark of the man he used to be, the man who fought for what was right. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him listen. Enough to make him stay. "Fine," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'll help, but only because you're right. There's no one else." Naomi smiled, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Thank you." Jared turned away from her and walked toward the door, his thoughts racing. He had made a choice. He didn't know where it would lead or if he was making a mistake, but he had chosen to face whatever was coming, and he wouldn't face it alone. The desert wind howled outside Jared's cabin, its fierce gusts carrying dust and sand in a swirling dance. The night was heavy with the promise of something dark on the horizon. Jared could feel it deep in his bones, like a storm brewing just beyond the mountains. It wasn't the kind of storm that came with rain. It was something worse, something that threatened everything he had fought to forget. He stood at the door, staring out into the dark wilderness. Naomi was still inside, resting, though he knew she wasn't truly sleeping. The same way he hadn't been able to sleep for years. Jared had always been a man of action. In the past, when danger came, he didn't hesitate. He fought. But this felt different. Naomi had opened a door to a world he had never known, a world filled with alien technology and the threat of destruction. He wasn't sure he wanted to be a part of it, but now that he knew, now that he understood what was at stake, he couldn't turn his back. As he stood there, a soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Naomi, her face serious, eyes sharp as ever. She stepped inside without waiting for him to speak. "We have to go," she said quickly, her voice tense. "The mercenaries are getting closer." Jared didn't need to ask how she knew. Naomi had a way of sensing things, a sixth sense that had kept her alive through countless battles. She was more than just a survivor. She was a warrior in a world that didn't make sense anymore. "Do you think we're ready?" Jared asked, his voice low, as if he was trying to convince himself. Naomi's eyes softened for a moment. "We don't have a choice. The longer we wait, the more time they have to get to us. We have to make it to the mountains before they do." Jared nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision. He had spent years hiding from the world, avoiding the consequences of his actions. But now, those consequences were closing in on him. Naomi was right. They had to move. The two of them packed quickly, gathering supplies, weapons, and anything that might help them survive the journey. Naomi's strength and focus were evident as she prepared, every motion deliberate. Jared found himself watching her, how she carried herself, how she moved with a quiet confidence that he hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. It was hard to believe she had come from the same world he had. She was a survivor, someone who had fought to protect her people. He was someone who had run away from everything. But they both had something in common now. They both had something worth fighting for. Within an hour, they were ready. Naomi led the way, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. Jared followed close behind, his hand on the grip of his rifle. He didn't know what awaited them out there, but he was ready to face it. Whatever it was, he would face it head on. He wasn't going to run anymore. As they made their way through the desert, the wind seemed to grow stronger, the air heavier. The landscape stretched out before them, an endless sea of sand and stone. The sky was a deep, dark blue, the stars barely visible through the swirling dust. It felt as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Jared couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his eyes darted from shadow to shadow. Naomi moved silently ahead, her every step purposeful. She seemed to sense it too, but she didn't stop. She was too focused on what lay ahead. After hours of traveling, they reached a small canyon that Naomi had marked on their map. It was a natural hideout, hidden from the eyes of anyone who didn't know where to look. As they entered, the canyon walls rose high around them, blocking the wind and sheltering them from view. It was a temporary safe place, but it would have to do. They set up camp quickly, a small fire flickering between them. Naomi sat down beside it, her face illuminated by the soft glow. Jared sat opposite her, staring into the fire. The crackling of the flames was the only sound for a moment, but the silence felt different this time. It wasn't just the quiet of the desert night, it was the silence before the storm. Naomi broke the silence first. "They'll be looking for us by now. The mercenaries won't stop until they find us." Jared nodded, his eyes fixed on the fire. "We won't be easy to find." Naomi smiled slightly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't know them like I do. They'll track us across the desert if they have to. They don't care about the land or the people they destroy. All they care about is the power they can control." Jared looked up at her, his eyes narrowing. "What power are they after?" Naomi hesitated before answering. "The technology," she said softly. "The alien machines. They can control the land itself, create storms, cause earthquakes, even change the weather. They want to use it to control everything." Jared's mind raced. He had heard rumors of strange happenings, of new machines and weapons that could change the world. But this was something else entirely. He had never imagined that the war he had fought in, the battles he had left behind, could lead to something like this. "We have to stop them," he said, his voice steady. Naomi's gaze met his, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and resolve. "We will, but it's not going to be easy. They've already started using the technology. They're close to figuring it out." Jared stood up, his hand resting on the rifle at his side. "Then we stop them before they get the chance." Naomi nodded. "We'll need to move fast. We're not just fighting for our survival anymore. We're fighting for everyone." Jared looked out into the desert, the dark silhouette of the mountains rising in the distance. The wind had started to die down, and the air felt still, almost too still. He didn't know how much time they had left. But one thing was certain, the storm was coming, and this time there would be no running. They were in this together now, and no matter what came, they would face it side by side. The night passed quietly in the canyon, but neither Jared nor Naomi could find rest. The air felt too heavy with the knowledge that danger was closer than ever. They had no idea how long they had before the mercenaries found them, but every passing minute brought them closer to a fight they couldn't avoid. Jared sat by the fire, his rifle resting on his knee, his eyes scanning the darkness. Naomi was beside him, her hand resting on the hilt of her knife. Both of them knew that the time for hiding was over. They would need to confront what was coming head-on. The desert night was cold, but there was a strange stillness to the air. No wind, no sound, except the distant hum of the night creatures and the crackling of the fire. The silence felt like the calm before a storm, and Jared knew that whatever came next, it would be their final test. Naomi broke the silence first. "They'll come for us at dawn," she said, her voice low and steady. "We need to be ready." Jared nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. "I know." He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for something larger, something that could change the future of this land. Naomi had told him the truth, and now he understood. The mercenaries weren't just after them. They were after the power to reshape the world, to use alien technology to control the land, the people, and the very forces of nature itself. The sun would rise soon, and they would have to make a choice, to face the mercenaries head-on, or to run and hope for another chance. Jared didn't like to run, and he knew Naomi didn't either. They had come this far, and they couldn't back down now. Naomi stood up and walked to the edge of the canyon, her silhouette dark against the rising stars. She was always looking ahead, always focused on the next step, but Jared could see the weight in her posture, the burden of knowing what was at stake. "We'll fight," she said quietly, turning to face him. "But we need to use the land to our advantage. The mercenaries are good at hunting, but they don't know this place the way we do. We can make them come to us." Jared didn't need her to explain. He had learned enough over the past few days to understand her plan. The mercenaries had technology, but Naomi and Jared had the land itself. They knew how to move through it without being seen, how to use the terrain to stay one step ahead. He stood up and joined her, his mind focused on the task ahead. "Where do we start?" Naomi's eyes were sharp, her gaze fixed on the rocky outcrops and the path leading up to the mountains. "We set traps, we create distractions, and we draw them into the canyon. Once they're in, we take them out one by one." Jared nodded, already picturing the terrain in his mind. He had fought in battles before, but this would be different. This wasn't about standing in the open, facing a line of enemies. This was about using the land to outsmart the mercenaries, using their own strength against them. The plan was simple, but it would take all of their skill and cunning to pull it off. Naomi had already begun preparing, checking her weapons and marking the terrain with quick glances. Jared moved off to the side, choosing a spot where he could set up an ambush. The hours passed in tense silence. They worked quickly and efficiently, setting the traps and making sure every detail was in place. There would be no room for error. They couldn't afford to make a single mistake. As dawn finally broke, the first light of day crept over the canyon, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. Jared and Naomi crouched behind a large boulder, watching the horizon. They could see movement in the distance, dark figures on horseback, slowly making their way through the desert toward them. The mercenaries were coming. Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. Get ready. This was the moment he had been preparing for. No more hiding, no more running. It was time to face the mercenaries, and it was time to stop them. The mercenaries were getting closer, their horses kicking up dust as they rode. Jared could hear the faint sound of their voices, low and indistinct. They were talking, unaware of the danger that lay ahead. Naomi's hand went to her knife, and Jared's fingers tightened on the rifle. They waited, barely breathing, until the mercenaries were within range. Then, without warning, Naomi gave the signal. A loud crack echoed through the canyon, followed by a sharp whistle as a rock slide triggered the first trap. The mercenaries jumped in surprise, their heads snapping toward the sound. But it was too late. Jared opened fire, his shots ringing out in the early morning light. The mercenaries scrambled for cover, but Jared and Naomi were already on the move. They knew the canyon better than their enemies ever could. They moved quickly and silently, using the rocks and shadows to stay out of sight. One by one they picked off the mercenaries, their shots precise and deadly. The sound of gunfire echoed through the canyon, but Jared was focused only on the next target. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline rushing through his veins. This was what he had been trained for. The fight, the survival, and for the first time in years, he felt alive again. Naomi was beside him, her movements swift and fluid as she moved through the rocks, her knife flashing in the sunlight as she took down another mercenary. Jared couldn't help but admire her strength, her resolve. She was a warrior in a world that had forgotten how to fight. As the last mercenary fell, Jared lowered his rifle, his breathing heavy but controlled. The battle was over. They had won. But the victory was bittersweet. The danger wasn't over yet. The mercenaries had been a small part of something larger, something more dangerous. And Naomi knew that the fight wasn't finished. "We did it," Jared said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Naomi nodded, her face grim. "This is just the beginning." Jared looked out across the canyon, the sun now fully risen, casting a golden light over the land. He had fought for survival before, but this was different. He was fighting for something more than himself. He was fighting for a future, for a world that still had a chance. And he wasn't going to stop.